In 2025, China produced more solar panels than the entire world could use, twice as much. Prices collapsed 40% in a single year. Companies sold below cost just to move inventory. Dozens went bankrupt. And yet production accelerated. More factories, more capacity, more output flooding markets that couldn't absorb it. This isn't market logic, it's political logic. And it's the same logic that destroyed the Soviet Union. The pattern is identical. The USSR in the 1970s had factories producing steel nobody needed. Quotas met by manufacturing unusable goods, production targets that ignored demand. The system optimized for output, not profit, not utility, just numbers, because in a command economy, legitimacy comes from motion. The state proves it's working by making things, even when those things serve no purpose. China isn't the Soviet Union. It has markets, private companies, global integration. But underneath the surface, the incentive structure is eerily familiar. Local governments need factories running to service debt. State banks need those factories borrowing to justify balance sheets. The central government needs all of them working to maintain employment. If any part stops, the chain unravels, so everyone keeps producing. Even when it destroys profit, this is the legitimacy engine. A system where growth isn't economic strategy, it's political survival. The social contract has one clause, keep growing and the people keep believing. That worked when growth created rising incomes. It doesn't work when growth only creates cheaper goods. If you're watching China's economy and wondering why overproduction continues despite collapsing profits, stay with me. Because the answer isn't in economics textbooks. It's in the mechanics of authoritarian capitalism. And those mechanics are breaking down in real time. The Soviet parallel is instructive. Growth slowed. Living standards plateaued. The leadership had a choice, reform the system or maintain the illusion. They chose illusion. Factories kept producing. Quotas kept rising. The numbers looked good on paper, but shelves stayed empty, quality deteriorated, innovation stopped. Because the system rewarded compliance, not competence. Meeting targets, not meeting needs. The collapse took 20 years, not because the economy stopped, but because it kept running in circles, producing without purpose, growing without wealth. And when the facade finally cracked, there was nothing underneath. No resilience, no adaptability, just exhausted momentum. The USSR didn't fall to external pressure. It fell to internal contradiction. The very system designed to prove strength revealed fatal weakness. China is running the same script with different actors. In 2024, industrial profits fell over 20%, despite record exports. Factories are shipping more goods than ever and earning less from each one. The solar industry produces double global demand. Electric vehicle makers flood domestic markets with 100 competing brands. Battery manufacturers sell below cost, not because demand justifies it, because production must continue. Why? Because China's legitimacy depends on it. The Communist Party doesn't derive authority from elections. It derives authority from performance, specifically economic performance. The implicit deal is simple. We deliver prosperity. You accept our rule. But when prosperity stalls, the deal becomes fragile, so the state manufactures the appearance of growth, even when that growth is hollow. Local governments illustrate this perfectly. They borrow to build industrial parks. The parks attract factories. The factories create jobs and output. The output justifies more borrowing. The cycle continues until profits disappear. Then what? In a market economy, unprofitable factories close. Capital reallocates. The system corrects. But in China's hybrid model, closure means political failure. Local officials lose face. Workers lose jobs. Social stability threatens. So the factories stay open. Subsidized, zombie firms producing zombie goods. The numbers tell the story. China's steel capacity exceeds global demand by nearly 50%. Solar panel production in 2023 was double what the world installed. Electric vehicle inventory is piling up in lots. Companies aren't scaling back, they're scaling up. Because the incentive isn't profit, it's motion. The appearance of vitality matters more than actual vitality. This is legitimacy engineering, and it's unsustainable. The Soviet Union proved that. For decades, Moscow published growth statistics that looked impressive. 5-year plans met targets, industrial output climbed. On paper, the system worked. In reality, factories produced tractors that broke down immediately. Steel mills made unusable metal. Consumer goods were shoddy or non-existent. The disconnect between reported success and lived experience grew until belief evaporated, and with it, the system. China hasn't reached that point. Yet, its products work, its infrastructure is real, its exports dominate global markets. But the underlying dynamic producing for political legitimacy rather than economic logic is corroding the foundation. When profit becomes secondary to optics, efficiency becomes waste, and waste compounds, quietly until it doesn't. Consider what happens when a system can't stop producing. Prices fall, wages stagnate, demand weakens. Normally, this signals firms to reduce output, cut costs, innovate. But when the state subsidizes production, those signals get ignored. Factories keep running, capacity keeps expanding. The market drowns in excess supply, and the economy slides into deflation, not the healthy kind from productivity gains, the destructive kind from oversupply nobody wants. This is China's trap in 2025. It lifted hundreds of millions from poverty, built cities, created infrastructure. But now it struggles to raise living standards further, because the model that worked for catch-up growth doesn't work for mature development. Catch-up is easy. Copy what others built, compete on price, scale ruthlessly. But maturity requires innovation, quality, sustainable margins, none of which happen when the priority is keeping factories open. The political dimension makes this worse. In democracies, economic pain triggers leadership change. The system self-corrects through elections. In authoritarian systems, economic pain threatens the regime, so the regime delays correction, subsidizes failure, extends the unsustainable. The Soviet Union did this with energy subsidies, price controls, rationing. Each intervention bought time, but also deepened dysfunction. Eventually, the interventions consumed the economy they were meant to save. China isn't there yet. Its reserves are vast. Its administrative capacity is strong. It can sustain overproduction longer than the USSR could. But sustainability has limits. Every factory kept alive on subsidies is capital not invested in innovation. Every unprofitable firm drains resources from productive use. The longer this continues, the harder the eventual adjustment becomes. Because the longer you delay correction, the larger the imbalance grows. The irony is brutal. China's solar panels, batteries, and electric vehicles are exactly what the world needs for energy transition. Green technology at scale. But when companies sell at a loss, investment dries up. When profits collapse, research stops. The very industries meant to secure China's future become fragile. Because legitimacy-driven production destroys the profit motive that sustains innovation. You can flood markets with products, but you can't flood them with progress. This creates a global problem. Western companies can't compete with subsidized Chinese firms. They exit the market. Jobs disappear. Industrial capacity shifts entirely to China. Then China has a monopoly. In theory, it could raise prices, restore margins. But raising prices reduces demand, and reduced demand means lower output, which threatens employment, which threatens legitimacy. The trap closes. Even monopoly doesn't solve the problem, because the problem isn't competition. It's the system's need for constant motion. The Soviet comparison becomes more relevant. Moscow controlled production, but couldn't make it profitable. Beijing influences production, but faces the same challenge. When legitimacy depends on output, output becomes an end in itself. Divorced from purpose, divorced from profit, and eventually divorced from reality. The USSR collapsed when reality could no longer be ignored. China isn't collapsing, but it's facing the same contradiction. And contradictions don't resolve, they accumulate. There's a human cost hidden in these numbers. Workers producing goods at a loss aren't building careers, they're treading water. Wages stagnate because firms can't afford raises. Consumption weakens because incomes don't grow. The economy that once lifted millions now traps them. Not in poverty, in stagnation. The promise was prosperity through hard work. The reality is harder work for the same result. That's involution at the individual level. And it mirrors the industrial involution consuming sectors. The leadership understands this. That's why every major policy speech mentions rebalancing. Shifting from investment to consumption. From quantity to quality. From production to innovation. But understanding the problem doesn't solve it. Because solving it requires accepting pain. Closing factories. Accepting unemployment, allowing failures, and pain undermines legitimacy, the very thing the system exists to maintain. So reforms get announced, then delayed, then diluted. And production continues. This is where the Soviet parallel becomes a warning. Gorbachev tried reform, glasnost, perestroika, transparency and restructuring. But reform revealed how deep the dysfunction ran. Once people saw the truth, belief collapsed. The system couldn't survive honesty. China's leaders learned that lesson. They're trying to reform without transparency, restructure without revealing the full scale of imbalance. It's a delicate operation, and it's unclear if it can succeed. What's clear is that legitimacy engines have a shelf life. They work when delivering tangible results. They fail when delivering only motion. The USSR's engine ran for 70 years, then seized. China's has run for 45. It's not inevitable that it fails, but the stresses are mounting. Overproduction, falling profits. Stagnant wages, rising debt, each one manageable alone. Together they form a pattern. And the pattern looks familiar. If this changed how you see China's economy, share it. Because what's happening isn't just overcapacity. It's a legitimacy crisis disguised as a production boom. And legitimacy crises don't announce themselves. They accumulate quietly until the system that seemed invincible reveals it was running on fumes. The question isn't whether China will collapse like the USSR. It's whether it can reform before motion becomes all it has left.